Hey guys, Resolute TV's first ever official episode of our book club going live on Tuesday morning. We're pretty thrilled to have David M. Salkin, a US New Jersey boy author. He's written a multitude of books, all different varieties. The guy's a superstar. Check him out. Righto, ladies and gentlemen, Resolute TV. This is our first official book club. We've had a heap of authors so far on the regular programming. And from that, it's sort of snowballed into, I've got sort of 7, 8 authors all really keen to talk about their work. And this isn't a fake bookshelf. I do collect an awful lot of books, and I'm sure I've read at least 90% of these. So I am a big reader, and create this opportunity to chat to distinguished and interesting authors all in different genres is really, really cool for me. So today, episode 1, we've got David M. Salkin, who's 12, 14, 15. Yeah, I mean, I can't keep up with how many novels you've written, but you seem to do
14.
a different style. 14 is the official number.
As of today.
As of today, brilliant.
I'm working on it.
Come on, hurry up. Can't you get a bit more done than that?
It's the publishers. If they would cooperate, we'd have a couple more.
Yeah, right. Well, to the publishers, start listening and hurry up, yeah?
That's it.
So, mate, look, thanks for coming on. Our friend A.R. Shaw, a mutual friend, also an author who I sort of had the pleasure of chatting with. She was a delight, and she sort of got really excited. She said, what a great idea. Can I introduce you guys? So, and here you are, which is, for me, it's great.
Me
14
too.
novels. What's your main genre? Tell, I mean, this is for the people.
So,
let them know who you are.
I'm a thriller writer, and thrillers are a genre of their own, but inside the thriller genre, I write, of the 14, I would say most of them are military espionage, sort of like Tom Clancy, Webb Griffin type, those kind of books. And then I have a couple of horror stories and a couple of crime stories. So, you know, a little bit of everything, but for me, it's really about the pace, which is, you know, writing the thriller, you know, so to make sure that their readers are always turning pages and staying up past bedtime. That's kind of the goal.
Now, I read sort of a little bit in your bio, though, that you tend to do a lot of shorter novels. Is that sort of a fair assumption? Well,
I would say I'm in the 75,000 to 80,000 words per book. So probably pretty average for commercial fiction. I know, you know, some guys like to go closer to 100. That's not me. I don't like to have a ton of detail. I like to sort of paint more of a picture so that the reader can paint their own, you know, ideas in their head as they're reading. I don't need to tell you what color the drapes are unless it's important for the story. You know, I'll tell you about the characters in more detail, but, you know, in terms of settings, and I don't like to just, you know, overindulge the settings and really get nitpicky on stuff like that, because for me, the difference between reading a book and watching a movie is that as a reader, you get to fill in the blanks, right? So that's kind of, everyone's experience is a little different. So sort of like Japanese painting style, you do a little bit less and the viewer gets to make up the difference. So
yeah. Which anybody who's
not vague, you know, I'll tell you what you need to know. It's just that I don't like to make it so mundane and bury you in detail. Yeah.
Look, and I mean, anybody who's ever read a book and then seen the movie version, right, more often than not, the comment, even on brilliant movie adaptations, will go, I really liked the book version, or the book version, I had such different imagery in my head. I really had a different picture of how the movie was going to be. So I suppose with you leaving those sort of areas out, if anything does ever get converted to more audio visual, they can be a bit more creative with what they sort of do that side. Is that sort of a fair thing to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair. And it also comes back to the idea of, as a thriller writer, for me, it's about pacing. You know, one page is leading you to the next all the time. So that, you know, I've had a lot of readers tell me, you know, it was a fast read. But a fast read doesn't necessarily mean it was a short book. It means you couldn't stop reading it. You read it in a couple of sittings because you had to know what was going to happen. And that's really the goal, I think, for most thriller authors, is to keep your audience past bedtime. You know, it's just because they can't stop. I got to know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. I was always one of those kids as a youngster. You know, I'd always have 2 or 3 books going at once, and it wasn't not uncommon for me to sit there at bedtime. You know, like when I was, however, you know, a little bloke going, oh, mum would come in and go, it's bedtime. I'm not finished this page yet. I'm not finished. I've got another 10 chapters to get through. You know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's always a good thing. It's a good feeling, I suppose, or it must be a good feeling for an author to know that people are really responding to your work in that capacity. It's not a 5-minute job writing.
I read every review, the good, the bad, the ugly. I read them all. I'm happy to say my readers are generally kind, but I do read them, and you know, you want the feedback because it's like, you know, a million years ago I used to play drums. And when you're performing on stage, you know, the audience pumps you up, right? I mean, the louder they're clapping, the harder you're playing, right? So reading, you know, and writing is the same experience. As a writer, you don't get to see your audience reading. You don't see their face to know if they're loving it as they're reading it. But when you get the reviews and they tell you, you know, something important in the review, you're like, oh, that's awesome. That's why I do this, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So for our readers, what are your sort of most well-known titles, or what titles do you want to push? What titles do you want to tell people about, and what are the stories, or what, you know, a bit of an overview?
I started my writing career. I have to give you a little backstory on me because I have a kind of a diverse background. I went to Rutgers, and then I went to gemology school and became a master graduate gemologist, and went into the family jewelry business where I worked for 25 years. So for 25 years, my brother and I were partners in a jewelry store, and that's what I was doing full time. And one of the technical magazines I was reading was called Gems and Gemology, and it was about synthetic diamond thin films. And it was very dry, you know, scientific material. But as I was reading, I was getting these ideas for a story in my head. And I was an English lit major at Rutgers, and so I was always writing, but never a novel. And I had this idea for this story, and so I wrote what in 2004 was a science fiction crime story. It was called Hard Carbon, and hard carbon to a gemologist is a diamond. So in the story, which was science fiction, the Russian mob takes a bunch of out-of-work scientists to take diamond thin films and build the next generation of supercomputers. So we went from vacuum tubes to silicon, and now we go from silicon to synthetic diamond. And these new computers are going to be used by the Russian mob to hack the web and steal money from banks around the world. Now, in 2004, this hadn't happened yet. So it was science fiction. I mean, you probably didn't even have Norton antivirus on your computer, because who would hack your computer? No one had ever done that. Yeah. So it was science fiction crime. It didn't get published for 10 years. So when it finally came out, it was just a crime story. And coincidentally, the week that the story broke from the publisher, Post Hill Press published it, that same week, the Russian mob had hacked about 2 billion passwords around the world. And I was just like, that's great media marketing, right? If you do, it's really funny. But
they're promoting your book for you.
I didn't mean it to be an instruction manual. It was just supposed to be entertainment. And the Russian mob must have read it and went, hey, this is a good idea. So a lot of stuff that I read over the years, just anecdotal little things have happened after I wrote them, which is always really kind of hilarious for me. So that was what started it. And then I wrote a counterterrorism book called Crescent Fire. So I live in New Jersey, in the United States, and I'm only 60 miles away from New York. And 2001, on September 11th, that was very personal to me. I had friends in those buildings. You know, I knew a lot of folks, and I could smell those towers for a couple of weeks. So it's just something you don't get over. And so I was pretty angry. It's probably fair to say I'm still pretty angry. But I wrote Crescent Fire as sort of cathartic for me. It was just a counterterrorism story where I just wanted to kill bad guys because I was really pissed. And so I submitted that story to Penguin Books, and Tom Colgan called me and said, you know, we're going to take your book. And Tom Colgan was the editor for Tom Clancy and Webb Griffin. So for me, this was like, you know, getting a call from Superman. I was so excited. And he said to me on the call, do you have a sequel? And I didn't have anything. I just finished my second book in my life, and, you know, was still trying to figure out, wow, I can write. And so what are you going to say when a guy says, yeah, I'll take this in the sequel? You say, I'm just working on it. So, send me the first 3 chapters and an outline. And I said, okay, but give me some time because I only just started it. And so I hung up the phone and I was like, oh, crud. Now what am I going to do? So again, this is now 2005. I needed a bad guy and a story. And so the story theme for Necessary Extremes was, what would the United States do if Iran got a nuclear weapon? Now, again, it was fiction when I wrote it. Iran didn't have a nuclear program. This wasn't in the news every day. And so now, if you were to read the book today, you'd be like, yeah, it's a cool story, but it's not that original. Well, it was at the time, I promise you.
Yeah, you're right.
The CIA or somebody read the book because it gives them ideas on how to fix this problem, what to do without causing World War III. So those were the first two. They were both military espionage. And then after that, I wrote a story called The Team. I had a customer in my store, a guy named who was a Vietnam veteran in the Navy. Before the Navy had the SEALs, they had UDTs, underwater demolition teams called frogmen. So he was a frogman in Vietnam for 2 tours, Cambodia, Laos, all the places that we weren't supposed to be. And after a second tour, he was put on the Navy All-Star Exhibition baseball team.
Okay.
The Navy didn't have an all-star baseball team. It was a CIA operation. So they took 15 superb athletes, put them in beautiful sweatsuits, and they toured around Southeast Asia on a bus together. And 15 guys would get off the bus and go into the dugout, and 11 would play baseball, and the other 4 would change their clothes and take off and go steal something or kill somebody or blow something up, and then they'll get back on the bus and leave. It was their cover story. The baseball team was a cover story. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I sat down with Al and I interviewed him for a couple of hours, and I said, look, I'm going to modernize your story and make it, Middle Eastern 2000, and I guess at that time it was probably 2008 or so. I said, and we're going to make a series out of this, right? So he was totally cool with it. I submitted that back to Penguin. Tom read it. He said, look, you're a good author. You're a good writer. We all like the story, but it's not believable. And I said, well, just so you know, it's the only thing I've ever written is based on a true story. so they balked. They didn't write it. So I went and I self-published it. And then after I self-published it, Post Hill Press and I had a discussion, and they decided to make a series out of it. So it ended up being 2 contracts of 3 books each, which was six books. And that went for 3 or 4 years, I guess, was the Team series. We had talked a couple of times. I was in New York a couple of times talking about movies. I thought at the time, I really thought this was my break. Like we're going to be on, Netflix or something with a new series. And it never materialized. Although a couple of years later, I did see something on TV that was very, very similar. And I was like, that's Hollywood for you. Thanks so much. But anyway, so who knows? But the Team series was probably my most popular. There were 6 of those. And then I wrote Deep Black Sea and Dark Tide Rising, which were science fiction horror, which for me, I'm a scuba diver. That was just fun. I love writing horror.
Okay. Yeah, right. So you're a scuba diver as well, a man of many talents, mate.
I get bored easily, like ADD or something. So yeah, I do like to do a lot of different things. And like you, I'm a chef. I like to cook.
I'm trying to retire from the whole cooking thing. I'm sort of over 20 years of the killer kitchen, so I'm sort of now exploring all these other things. And I think the whole COVID thing kind of just gave me an opportunity to explore a lot of different stuff. And this just turned into this whole Resolute TV started out as I'm not going to say a gag because it was never a gag, but it was I'd actually been working with a political party saying you guys need to do this sort of thing to start to build up your audience and interact and you know what I mean? Work with people in a medium that they can access at their own time, sort of thing. And after they didn't really run with it
offline, I served in Freehold Township, New Jersey for 25 years. I retired in January, but I was on the township committee. I served as mayor, deputy mayor, township committeeman, police commissioner, for 25 years. In fact, last year I was put in New Jersey Elected Officials Hall of Fame. So it was a nice way to go out. But yeah, I'm done with politics. Government.
A Hall of Famer.
A Hall of Famer, yeah. So I loved it when I was doing it, and I left it behind now, and now I can actually share my humor on Facebook without worrying about losing votes.
I haven't censored myself at all for any of this sort of political type stuff that I do, but yeah, mate. So look, this is how this all came about, and people go, "Oh, well, you didn't have enough A-grade equipment, and you didn't have, You know, why didn't you have this, or why didn't you do it this way? And I went, because I just did it. You know, I just sort of grabbed it and I went, let's do it. And it's very, I've got one of my philosophies is it's very easy to do nothing perfectly.
Right. So tell me about your cooking. What do you like to cook?
Cooking? Oh, look, I spent my young chef days at a place, like actually working in a casino, funnily enough, in Australia here, and did my training there. And then I sort of did what a lot of Aussie young chefs do and boarded a plane and went over to England. England's our gateway to European cooking, and you know what I mean? The Michelin star world certainly was back then. Obviously, there's the language barrier, so you go to England and traveling through there so that you can get your European experience, and spent a few years there. And that was, you know, that was, I had the time of my life, you know, I really did. And then came back and, you know, opened a few businesses, closed a few businesses, worked for other people, you know, did the whole rounds. And now I feel like I'm very old. But, you know, I mean, there's nothing better than finding whatever's local, wherever you are. You know, if you can buy the bit of fish from the guy over the road, and you can go down to a guy, you know, doesn't matter what it is, I don't mind. But if you get it fresh and it's good, or it's a little bit different, or somebody, a bit like writing a book, somebody's put a lot of effort into producing it or growing it, I like to work with it. You know, that's sort of,
it's creative. It's definitely, you know, food is like art.
It is. The unfortunate part is it's a bit of a low paying art that doesn't. Do you know what I mean? I mean, still,
it sounds like
yeah. That's it. Your biggest food sellers will always be bloody hamburgers. And I don't care how creative you are, you can only do so much with a hamburger, and that's what people want to eat. So you've got the world of cooking where you're doing the ultra fine dining, and you guys. When I started out, America was a bit of a laughing stock, as was Australia. You know, you weren't thought of that well in the food industry, but the last 20 years, you guys have come along in leaps and bounds, as have we. But at the time, nobody would have taken America particularly seriously as a culinary hub. There was a few guys emerging, but you see those top-end restaurants, and you know the guys right into it, and they do. Right. You know, you see the magic happen in the restaurants and on the plates, but people can't afford to do that every day or every week. And you know, the bottom line is for us, I'm still convinced the biggest seller in Australia is the chicken parmigiana. It's such a simple thing. It's not glamorous, but that's the most common thing people like. Most common thing. It's one of the most common thing people eat if they go out. You just go, parmigiana, really? You know. Right. So it's a fun little thing. Anyway, I'm sort of exploring other avenues. I'd always like to keep my fingers, you know, in the pie a little bit, but I certainly don't want to be working kitchen lines.
It's funny, when I closed my store in January 2016, and I wanted to write full time. That was my dream. So I did. I wrote full time for about a year and a half, and I loved every day that I woke up. Except after a year and a half, I wasn't making enough money, you know, for a family of 4 in New Jersey with 2 college kids. It just wasn't going to work. I had to go back to work. And all my friends and even my kids were like, Dad, you should open a restaurant, because I love to cook. And I'm a good cook. And I was like, you don't understand. Every weekend, every holiday, every party, every time that you guys want to go out, the chef's working. Their life sucks. It's like 15 hours a day, and every weekend and holiday, you can never go out with your friends. I'm like, that is not what I want to do.
Only 15 hours a day, you're not having a go. What are you doing half days for?
Half day.
Yeah, I mean, look, and yeah, that's been one of the running jokes, I suppose, with me is I don't even get invited to family functions anymore, because you're just gonna, you're gonna be at work. I'll be at work that weekend. Can't do it. I've got to work. I've got to function. I've got to serve somebody else.
You know, it's got to be a passion and a labor of love, because it's a brutal lifestyle.
And it is. And I've got a bit of a theory. If you had a nice, you know, if your entire family unit was in the restaurant with you, it'd be an amazingly beautiful thing. But if you're just part of a machine, or it's just the machine, you're just surviving. With this COVID stuff, it's all of our hospitality businesses worldwide are sort of on their backside struggling. I still have some modest interests in a couple of cafes, even though I've been stepping back. I was stepping back before COVID, but I've got a business partner who I love dearly, and he's killing himself just to keep the lights on, really, at the moment. Yeah, with all the shutdowns. And we've got all these committees and politicians on TV talking about, well, you can't open because it's unsafe. It's like, well, dying of starvation's unsafe as well, you know.
Right.
So it's a crazy time. But yeah, look, I mean, we'll have to have a cook-off or something. I've had a few people. I actually got. I don't know if you had a look at our other episodes, like the longer episodes. So we do some long form on Resolute. I've had a fellow named Father Chris Yates on in the earlier episodes. So we've been changing it and evolving. You know, people's lives happen, and he's determined to do a little cooking segment. It's like, I don't know how we do a cooking segment just like this. You know what I mean? Like, how would we set that up?
Kitchen, I guess. So the manuscript that I finished most recently that I'm currently trying to sell to a publisher is called Blood from a Stone, and the main character, Corey Walker, is a chef, not a professional chef. He just loves to cook, and he's an oenophile. So for him to make a meal and pair the right wine, that's what he loves to do. Which coincidentally, so does the author. So, and he's a sarcastic wise ass, just like the author. The only difference between me and the main character is that he's a former Delta Force operator who was injured, and so he's forced into medical retirement. And he buys a house on Harker's Island in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And as he's building a wine cellar in this house, he finds a diary in a crawl space. And the diary was from a 16-year-old girl who had been raped and murdered like 20 years earlier on the island. And nobody ever talks about it because it's the only bad thing that ever happened in this tiny little island community. And so he starts asking questions and looking around, and he's a trained badass who doesn't take no for an answer. So he's going to find, what really happened. And so it's a murder mystery, except that the stepfather of this girl is probably going to be the next president of the United States. And the fact that he was abusing his stepdaughter is not going to be good for his campaign. So now it becomes people in power are going to kill him before he can ever do anything with his diary. So it's, typical dark, gritty thriller juxtaposed with a very sarcastic, wise-ass main character, but the character likes to cook. So if you go to my webpage, davidmsalkin.com, and you look on the blogs, you'll find a tab that says, "What would Corey do?" And there you will see tons of recipes and wine pairings and pictures of food and whatever.
Brilliant.
It's just stuff that I like to cook.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. And it sounds like a great story too. And look, with everything going on in the world today, I know there's an awful lot of people who would look at a character like that and a story like that and go, that could well be, a non-fiction book, like
it's believable. Yeah, it's believable.
Very believable. There's a lot of people who, I know a lot of people themselves going, shady governments, and shonky people in politics doing shady stuff. And, and you look at it, there's some merit to it. There is some, how far will people go to protect their power or their authority or cover their ass, as we call it over here? I'm pretty sure you call it something very similar.
Call it the same thing. CYA, cover your ass.
Who would have guessed? we were actually called America's attack dogs this week by China. That was an interesting one for us.
I think it's a compliment.
Well, funnily enough, I'd rather be America's attack dogs than China's
lapdog.
Yeah, that's right. So but yeah, that come out. I don't know if you heard that this week, but Australians and Chinese are currently having a few disagreements. The Chinese aren't happy with our take on the whole COVID thing, which is quite interesting because most of the world's not real happy with China's take on the COVID thing. So
I wrote my Facebook post this morning and I said, with all that virus and nastiness coming out of China, I think somebody should just build a giant wall around the whole country.
You're right, Trumpy.
No, it was a Great Wall of China joke, but never mind.
That's all right. No, that's an old joke. Nowadays, we're talking about the Donald's Wall, aren't we?
Yeah, on our southern border, yes. That's a whole different story.
Oh,
but,
all
national
about walls.
And I'll get yelled at by your viewers now, too. But, when there's a pandemic going on, all of a sudden, maybe we should have closed borders. Who knows?
Well, look, my viewers are libertarians. They're all a bit mad in their own way, so that's not really an issue. We all have our pros and our cons, but it's a really interesting world scenario at the moment. I'm sure you're going to come out with some great material inspired by some of this, I suspect.
I try to stay away from politics in writing because I did it for so many years. It's not fun. I want to escape just like my readers want to escape. So I love writing horror, and it's not been what I've written the most of, but Deep Black Sea and Dark Tide Rising, Hunger, they're terrifying stories. They're really, it's horror. It's true horror. It's so much fun to write. And I think, you know, based on my friends who read them, they're like, dude, how do you sleep at night? Because I know they were terrified when they were reading it. And I'm like, that's awesome. I love that. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
right.
I'm going to be the next Stephen King, but I really like writing horror. And I finished a manuscript called Little Things Big, which it needs to be edited, but that's going to be down the road a bit too. It's the idea of that one was to end world hunger. They're going to supersize animals. So, you know, cows,
Ah,
1,500 pounds, a cow will weigh 15,000 pounds, growing at extremely fast speed so that the economies of scale to feed the animal, it's still very profitable.
yeah.
But they experimented early on with skin mites because their the way they grow in their life cycle, et cetera. It was just an easy organism to work on. But in the lab, the skin mites get out. And so instead of being microscopic things that live on your eyelashes, now they're the size of rats living in packs and just taking down people. It is disgusting, but it's great fun.
Well, and I just even on that concept, I can already see the guys in the lab tinkering, and I can see it all going ballistic, and you know the wild mites going mental and attacking people, and you can
Disgusting. Yeah.
visualize it. You can see the story happening. That's fantastic.
In college, I took a lot of entomology classes, and the only thing that ever really grossed me out was parasites. I find parasites to be the most horrifying creatures on a planet. And so writing a book about that I had to.
So politicians.
Yeah. Deep Black Sea is sort of the same vein. The first book, it's disgusting, and you know, it's fun.
It's fun. Sounds like a lot of fun. So you say, what sporting teams do you follow in the US? The whole idea of this book club is
The
to get
only
to know the
sport for me
authors.
is football, not soccer, football, American football. And I'm a New York Giants fan. So the last couple of years have been a little rough as a fan, but
Yeah.
I'm a Giants
So
fan.
I sort of follow you guys vaguely. I started following the Ravens around 2000.
Okay.
Baltimore, just because I don't know. One day I was watching TV and there was something on, and Ray Lewis was being a lunatic, and I thought it was highly entertaining. And I was like, "How cool is
Ray
that?"
was a very formidable defensive player for sure.
Just a big personality with it. I went, "Oh, I like this guy," and then I watched a bit more. And I went, "Oh, yeah, all right." Well, I mean, obviously we don't, unless you've got a regional allegiance, you just sort of pick a team you like. So that's pretty cool. I don't really have any other US teams that I sort of follow other than, you know, I sort of keep a half eye on some of the sports over there. But you guys have your
only
own
sport
worlds.
that I follow is the rugby team, the All Black, New Zealand.
Yeah, that's New Zealand.
Haka. So I just want to watch. I just wanted to watch the Maoris. I don't even care about the sport. I just want to watch the pregame stuff. I find that
they do. There's a pretty intimidating old routine but the whole rugby union sport seems like it's in fairly well dire straits. I know Australian rugby is an absolute disaster at the moment, but that's a lot of that's self-inflicted from what I can tell. So such is life, really. But so what else? What else do you do? What else do you want to sign off on? Where do we all find David Salkin books? Obviously, your website. Can they get them hardcover?
So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, they carry a lot of my books. But Amazon's certainly always easy during the pandemic. You can dial from home. If you go to my website, davidmsalkin.com, you'll see all the descriptions about the books and some of the reviews, or you know, obviously the reviews are on Amazon. If I could give you a plug, it would be for Battle Scars. I don't know if you could.
Yeah.
All right. So this was a screenplay that I wrote, and then I realized my odds of getting a screenplay produced are pretty slim, so I backed it into a book. But the book's only 120 pages, so I self-published it because it's a novella, which is hard to sell commercially. This is the only book I've ever written that wasn't written for entertainment purposes. I've been working with Wounded Warriors for 25 years, and a lot of the guys that I met over the years have told me some personal stories, which became the main character for Battle Scars. So it's a Marine deployment to Afghanistan, an IED injury, and coming home and dealing with that injury and the loss of battle buddies and on with your life. So it's a tough read. Some parts are funny, some parts will make you cry, but it's inspirational, and it's something that I use the proceeds, portion of that for doing stuff for just
helping out and doing the right thing.
Yeah, but honestly, it's probably my best 120 pages. You'll fly through 3 hours, but the book is not as much straight ahead as you think it is. So when you close the book at the end, you'll be thinking about it for a week.
Yeah, look, that's fantastic. My older brother's a veteran, so I always like to sort of support veteran things wherever I can.
He would dig it. Battle Scars.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'll recommend it to him for sure. So anyway, I'm going to put the link up on this on we've got our Facebook page, Resolute TV. I've got a couple of personal pages, which, I'll share all this around. And then, of course, Resolute TV, the YouTube channel. And it'll be up by the end of the week. So
awesome.
we're just working out some scheduling, and we're going to just sort of every week start rolling out the book club. So thanks for being our first official guest on the formal book club, David. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we might do it again at some stage. We'll get you in for something else when we need some creative personality or some cooking.
Well, when I come out to the Great Barrier Reef to go scuba diving, you're cooking for me.
Oh, sounds like a plan. It's a fair hike from me where I am to the Great Barrier Reef, but I tell you, I'll come for a holiday.
Where are you? What city?
I'm the city. It's about 4,000 people where I am. A little place called Temora. We're out in the middle of nowhere. I'm about 5 hours or 4.5, 5 hours from Sydney.
So are you on the East Coast?
East Coast?
Southeast?
No, we're on the East Coast, but we're sort of inland on the East Coast sort of thing.
Inland, okay. Okay.
Interesting little geographical spot. There's not a whole lot out here, but yeah, I sort of was born out here and returned home at the start of this year to work on the family home and all these sorts of things. So yeah, look, when you come over, let me know and we'll catch up for a beer or two or a glass of wine and something good to eat.
In. You got
David M. Salkin, thank you. Welcome to the Resolute TV Book Club, mate. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.